friends, internet strangers, internet stalkers, whoever you might be, knitting enthusiasts, sewing enthusiasts, everyone's welcome. Hello. Welcome to the first episode of the Big Knot Knitting Podcast. As a first-time viewer, you are in for a bumpy ride because, just like you, I'm here for the first time. My name is Brianna, but I'll probably go by Bri a lot more with this podcast. It's just easier, a lot less typing for myself. I'm a knitter, engineering student, beginner sewer and quilter, if I'm allowed to call myself that yet, and general crafting enthusiast. So eventually I hit a point where I was like, I'm going to make a podcast. No one else wants to talk about my crafting stuff 24/7, so I'm sure the people on the internet will. I'm coming to you live from the sunroom of my boyfriend's house. Don't worry, he's part of my pandemic cohort. We're being as safe as we can, within reason, obviously. I was going to start today with a sweater tour. Then when I was writing my show notes, I was like, this is going to take me hours just to get through the sweaters and then leave me no content for later. So if a sweater tour is something you guys think you might be interested in, leave a comment down below. I've got about 8 sweaters finished so far, almost 9, 10. You'll see the ones that are in progress. But I think what we'll do is we'll start off with a brief introduction. Then I'll talk about what it is I'm wearing. It's much too hot today to be wearing a sweater. And then we'll go into WIPs, followed by what I'm calling optimistic planning, which is going to sub in as flash stash today. It's going to be a little bit about a few yarns that I've acquired that have projects planned for them, hopefully. Hope springs eternal over here. You'll see with my WIP pile. And then I have some exciting pattern news at the end, so stay tuned for that. I can be found as Big Knot Knitting on Instagram, as well as Ravelry. I've created a podcast group on Ravelry for this podcast. It will be linked in the description below, and that's where you can find the show notes for everything I talk about, be that patterns, weird websites, child-safe weird websites, yarn dyers, bag designers. Really, it's going to depend on what I choose to talk about. But let's get right into it. I'll introduce myself briefly, which I've kind of already done, but I'll do it again in case I decide to do some weird editing. My name's Brianna. I'm probably going to go by Bri. I've been knitting seriously for about 4, maybe 5 years. I kind of started in high school. It was just things knit flat and stuff that I could buy at my local craft shops. Nothing wrong with that. But I've become more serious into it as I find it helps me relax when I'm studying. So yeah, between my first and second years of university, I have plowed through 8 sweaters and a ton of other stuff. I am a geek, so TV show, book talk, all that stuff's inevitable here. If you're not into talking shenanigans and yarn, you're better to find someone who just wants to talk yarn, because I will talk shenanigans. That being said, I'm going to start, like Amy Florence, one of the younger podcasters who has encouraged me vicariously to do this, with the weather forecast. I live in Canada, so I will be doing this in Celsius and don't have the brain power to do the conversion. So right now it's quite sunny, although it does appear we may be in for a thunderstorm. The forecasts are suggesting we might get a thunderstorm. Those are my favorites. I'm kind of hoping that happens. It's currently 24 degrees Celsius. It's much too warm to be wearing my finished object, so it will be coming off soon. And then I'm also going to do a fun science fact every time I remember to include one. So today's fun science fact is that we can detect fake oil paintings thanks to the nuclear bombs dropped during World War II. Prior to World War II, the oil paints would not have had strontium-90 and cesium-137 isotopes in the oil, meaning any authentic oil painting does not have radioactive isotopes in it, but any replica, copy, fraudulent painting does. So that's how we can tell them apart. It's super cool. It's kind of interesting. Fan of art, fan of science, put them together. It's perfect. So, as I said, it's super warm here. Way too warm here. I'm a like 10 to 20 degrees Celsius window kind of gal where I can wear my sweaters and my jeans. This is a t-shirt, maybe even tank top in short weather right now. I meant to film this podcast earlier, but instead I went strawberry picking at a U-Pick in my area. Together, myself and my boyfriend's mother, Glenda, picked almost 90 pounds of strawberries, which is ridiculous. I'll be sure to remember to include some photos probably here. I'm not quite sure how that works yet. Of the strawberries that we picked, because they are, I kid you not, this big, which is super abnormal for our area. It's been really wet and rainy here, so we've lucked out and had a ton of really nice growing conditions for fruit. So I'll include pictures of that. It was really nice. Got outside, spent the day in the sunshine. We snuck in just before they were going to stop letting people pick. So we had like 2 whole rows to pick to ourselves and the whole field to ourselves. It was awesome. If you have the opportunity to pick berries or fruit or veggies or whatever in your area, I totally recommend it, even though compared to the grocery store, it's not a huge savings. It's super fun. You get like the best tasting strawberries. I'm gonna eat so many strawberries when I'm done this podcast. But you're not here to talk shenanigans. You're here to talk knitting, I'm sure. So let's get into what's around my neck. This is a project that's been on my needles since before Christmas. Not 100% sure exactly when. It was the victim of being bored in class. I bought a whole fade set from Knit Picks and went, I'm gonna knit the Find Your Fade shawl. It's a marathon of a shawl. Like, you can knit for 2-3 hours on it and feel like you made no progress. So if you're considering it, it may be a better monogamous project. I think I finished 2 or 3 sweaters in the time I was knitting this because I have a little bit of project focus problems. At least lately. Maybe that's because of the way the world is, who knows. But it's knit in a pre-made fade set. I looked recently, they don't have them on the website right now, but it's Knit Picks Hawthorne, which is a 100% wool fingering weight. It is 7 colors, it's quite long. So I don't remember the color names of all of them, but I believe it was called their Northern Lights fade, or Aurora Borealis, something along that line. Personally, the fade feels a little more sunsetty to me, but that color, it's fine. So I'm going to take it off because it's a beast of a shawl and it's way more beautiful not on me. But here's what it looks like on. Gratuitous boob shot, you're welcome. So it's an asymmetrical triangle. Fades from one color all the way through to the other color. I can probably wrap it if I really want to, like, that many times. It does get to like -30 here, so that might actually be quite practical. I don't know. I haven't had a winter in it yet. But I haven't blocked this either, so I have a feeling it'll get much, much bigger. I can't even get it into frame, so I'll remember to include some pictures. But it's got this beautiful eyelet pattern. It's super simple. The rest is squishy garter stitch. It's symmetric most of the way until you hit the tip. I can't see, I'm hoping you can see that. And then it starts to decrease along the one side and it fades into my purples. If it wants to cooperate, there we go. So this is a pattern by Andrea Mowry. Came out kind of around her fade era, where the So Faded and the Free Your Fade, all those fade patterns came out. As much as I call it my slog knit, It took me about 9 months to make, so I also joked that technically I could have made a baby in the time I made this sweater, or this shawl. I didn't, but too many exams for that. But I'm super happy with the fade. I'm in love with this rose gold, which I think is Burlingame. Could be wrong. And then the blues all just faded so well together. I'm super happy with how this turned out. It's becoming a wardrobe staple, which is weird because I never saw myself as a shawl girl. I'm going to sit back down now. So that's what I'm wearing. It's the only fully finished object we're going to see today. I was planning to do a sweater tour because I have quite a few finished sweaters. I think what I'll do is I'll let you guys drop a comment below if that's something you're interested in, because I can do a tour for the next video or do a bonus video or something. Or I can just start wearing the sweaters and using them as my finished objects as I progress into more episodes. So now that we've seen the finished object, I think we can jump into my WIPs. My mighty, mighty pile of WIPs. Today I've got 2 sweaters, a cardigan, socks, and a shawl. And I will be discussing a few sewing WIPs that didn't make it with me today just because they're much too big to be trucking between places and showing up to the camera. And this was my first time I wasn't going to fight with a quilt. So, I think I'll start with the half object, the hoe, if you will. I am knitting a pair of, if you look in my library, they're called Appalachian Trail socks. But on the pattern, I think they're Susquehanna Trail socks. They're by Kimberly Delacruz. And I'm knitting them as a sort of informal knit along with a fiber share friend of mine. I bought her a pair of the yarn I used for this sock, and I sent it to her in this fiber share thing, and I was like, I have this sock set, you have this sock set, they're from my area, why don't you pick a pattern from your area and we'll knit matching socks. So the yarn's from around Calgary and the pattern's kind of from the Pennsylvania area, I believe. I cast these on in March and I'm still totally not done. Socks are a big slog for me, so if anyone has a tip for not taking like 6 months to get 1 pair of socks done, I'd love to hear it. That'd be awesome because I clearly have a problem. Anyway, the finished one is in this lovely bright orange, orange, pink, and yellow micro stripe. There's this really beautiful sort of vine-like lace pattern that runs the length of the foot. In the pattern photos, it runs to the toe, but then the way the pattern was suggested, suggested not to go to the toe. I didn't think I wanted lace on my toes, so I stopped at the toe decrease. It's a heel flap and gusset, which for the only other pair of socks I've knit is my currently favorable heel. I like the way that it makes it look. The yarn pooled really cool on this one. This is awesome. I like the pooling. So that's the first sock. It's the finished one. So my half object. Then the other one is a very different color and very little progress. If you look really, really close, you can see just the beginning of the lace pattern on the sock. I started this a month-ish, month and a half ago. Haven't picked it up since. If you've noticed, they're very different colors. That's because this is a Sea Turtle Fiber Arts Ridley Sock Evil Twin Set. They sell 2 50-gram minis. The minis are designed to coordinate but be different. They make your socks sisters but not twins. I know some people are obsessed with their self-stripings being completely matched. I find this helps me maybe keep more interested. Mind you, it's taking me just as long to knit these as it took to knit my my sunshiny yellow socks, my Coffee Talk socks by Tracy Miller. They took me forever. No fault of her, completely fault of myself. But this is my first work in progress. I'm really hoping I can get these done soon. But, I don't know. Socks take me a long time, so please give me some recommendations, because, yeah. So then, second WIP, I think I'll do shawls, and then I'll do all the sweaters at once, because my stash flash / optimistic planning sessions, basically all sweaters. So it'll feel appropriate. This can be called the sweater episode. So, the next work in progress is my barcode shawl by Jody Brown of the Grocery Girls, another duo who inspired me to take on this podcasting. It's super simple and it's so squishy. I knit this whole chunk of it in like a day. It looks like color work, but it's not. Jody Brown's a genius. She knows I'm a lazy knitter. It's a asymmetrical triangle, if you couldn't tell. It's on hold because I need the needles for a different project that I'm a little more committed to at the moment. I'm using Fibershare yarn from my Fibershare friend who is sending to me. And she sent me, as she was German but doing an exchange kind of here, I asked her to send me stuff that was like her favorite from where she's from. So she sent me super popular yarn in Germany, and I'm going to butcher it even though I'm trying to learn German. Sachemeyer, pretty sure that's close, probably not. It's their Regia Premium Alpaca Soft Base. So it is, apparently I've lost half the ball band. It is 62% wool, 23% probably nylon, nylon, and 15% alpaca. So it's got this really, of course, my background is blowing me out. The trees are beautiful, but too bright. It's got this beautiful fluffy halo, and it's making the colors blend really, really well. And the yarn has this really interesting effect of being like white, with just the dusting of color on top, which I'm finding really interesting. So anyway, hoping to get this one done. It's knit on US 10s, which are, oh boy, that's not good. Hang on one moment. It appears I'm dropping stitches on a different WIP. That can be fixed later, that's fine. On a 5.5 millimeter needle. I really need to learn those conversions. But anyway, I'm really enjoying working on this, even though the fact that it's on hold may suggest otherwise. I think I have 2 more repeats of each color shift, so it should be about 3 times as long, I think. I don't know, it's a paid for pattern, I'm not going to give it away. So now on to sweaters. This is my longest standing WIP, and I have some concerns about it. I am knitting the Le Pouf cardigan by Hedgehog Fibers. It's a free pattern, except instead of fading and holding 2 strands of fingering single, I'm holding 1 strand of fingering with 1 strand of mohair in the same color. This is Crooked Kitchen Yarn Company, who is based in Ontario. It is the colorway Smoking Jacket on both their mohair and their less luxurious fingering weight. I don't remember the name of it. I think it's a 75-25 merino nylon. As you can see, I didn't realize this, but the sweater's super airy and the bright light's not doing any justice. But it's a deep coppery brown with just the slightest flecks of magenta and teal and a little bit of green throughout it. It's super pretty. I'm loving the color and it's super soft. But I'm already kind of playing yarn chicken. I have 1 more skein of mohair and 2 more skeins of fingering. And it's getting there slowly, we'll see. I think I'm going to knit the body until this runs out. This is the first ball of both bases. And then I'm going to knit the sleeves as far as I can with the remaining ball of mohair and another ball of fingering. And then I'll see how the length is. If I have leftover mohair from the sleeves, I'll do more on the body, obviously. But then I have a couple skeins of Malabrigo sock in their crushed or velvet grapes. It's a deep dark purple color. I think I'm going to hold those double to do my cuffs and the button band, because there's purple in this colorway, so then the purple will tie in and it'll have contrasting cuffs and hems. It's taking me a while. I think it's because you're knitting flat, so back and forth, and I don't pro very fast. I am hoping to get it done. It'll be a really good like transition season cardigan. Then we're gonna go into another problem WIP. I have a lot. This is my City Limits sweater by Tanis of Tanis Fiber Arts. I knit this because I saw Tracy of the Grocery Girls, Tracy Miller. She knit this version in a beautiful blue fade. So I teamed up with a friend who's learning to knit, and I sent her a fade I curated for her of Malabrigo sock. I'm gonna ask her if I can put the photo in the podcast. If she lets me, I'll put a photo here. If not, it's beautiful. It fades from like teal into darker blues, into purples and greens, and then dark purple. She's almost done. I got distracted and I still have sleeves, but that's how life goes sometimes. So I picked her fade, and then she went online and picked me a fade. We ordered our yarn through Stash Lounge, a local yarn store here in the city. And she picked a fade I probably wouldn't have picked for myself, but as I was looking through my sweater quantity, is a color I really lack. So she faded for me to pinks, into purples, and then browns. Turned out I needed an extra skein, so I snuck a skein from Stash in there, but it's a little concerning yarn chicken wise, if I'm gonna be honest. I screwed up somewhere. I never gauge swatch. I like to live dangerously. And it's worked out for me so far. I know it really shouldn't. Someone on some podcast said that if you never gauge swatch and your sweaters always turn out you have horseshoes up your butt. I must have horseshoes up my butt. But this one I gauge swatched and it looked like it was gonna be okay. So I think I miscalculated my stripes, made them too long, I don't know. I'm considering pulling it back and maybe doing it again, but that's a lot of work, so maybe not. Anyway, here it is in its long and faded glory. It's a very mixed bag of yarn, so I'll break them down stripe by stripe. But my stripes are about 2 3/4 inches long. And I'm not going to wear it stockinette side out. I'll probably wear it reverse like Tanis does in the photos with the reverse stockinette on the outside. But it's quite long. I don't know the full measurement, but I know when I wear it, it's definitely like a with leggings kind of sweater where it starts to creep into sweater dress. But the pattern's super fun to knit. It's my friend's first ever sweater, and except for having to learn magic loop and then ultimately ditching the short rows, she was able to do it super successfully all on her own, more or less. And hers is beautiful. So if you're on the fence about, is City Limits too tough for me, you can probably totally knit it. I think I might do a version at some point and just worsted and not fade, because it's just I think if I stopped and measured things a little bit more, it's such a wearable sweater. So, I didn't write the names down. I'm going to try not to screw them up, but I will link them all appropriately in my show notes. The first color is Peach or Peach Pit. I believe it's a Vivid Yarn Studio colorway. And it's this beautiful peachy color with flecks of orange and browns and A little bit of pink and purple. It's very pretty. And then we faded into Crimson by Cozy Yarn Company. I don't remember. The logo's super cute. It's a little blue sheep. I'll be sure to link it. And it's just a tonal reddish fuchsia-y kind of color. And then we went into, and I know this one because I've been admiring it before, Fig by Olan in Ireland. It's on her dongle fingering base. And it's this beautiful, deep purple with flecks of brown, flecks of gold, flecks of cream. It's just deep and makes me very happy. And then, of course, it's got the neps, which are super fun. The third color is the one I added just to make sure I had enough to get the length. But it is Fool's Gold by Hedgehog Fibers. It was a gift to me for Christmas, and it is their single sock base. Fool's Gold is one of my favorite colorways. It's the only time I've used it, though. You Will Learn Gold is a very favorite of the podcast. But it's this deep, pretty gold with all kinds of speckles of its friends, purples, teals, things that I really enjoy. Then we get into another Vivid Yarn sock in, it's a tan colorway, obviously. I want to say it might just be called tan, but it's probably not. I'll be sure to link it as well, but it's just a deep tonal sandy color. And then the final color is Ancient Arts Fiber in their Lascaux fingering base, which is this really interesting rustic-y blend. And this is the colorway Cinnamon. It's definitely a very different texture from all the merinos up above it. But I think that the puffiness on the cuffs is kind of nice, and I think it'll work really well on the sleeves. I might take a picture of me wearing it to better describe the length. If I do, it'll go up there. But the big problem I'm having with this sweater is I have 2 full-length sleeves to put on my monkey arms. Yeah, and I have this much yarn left. I haven't weighed them, but my guess is I've got maybe for my bigger balls 40 grams, and then for my smaller ones probably 20 grams of each left. So I'm mildly concerned about the sleeves. So I'm thinking what I might do is fade as far down as I can and then do contrast lower arms or something in a coordinating color from stash, or from my stash, not the store. But we'll see. It's been sitting in the WIP pile. The body's been done for a long time, but it's sitting in the WIP pile because I'm not sure what to do about my sleeves. But I know once that's done, it should be nice. It may block really big. I'm mildly concerned about that. If anyone has suggestions on if I should tear it back or just press forward and see what happens, I'd like to hear those, I guess. So then I have one more WIP today, and that is a brand new WIP. I cast it on Friday, which was, it's Wednesday now, so that's Tuesday, Monday, Sunday, Saturday. 4 days ago, roughly, that I cast it on. I cast on the Simone sweater by Gabriella Knits. She's hosting a knit along for the whole collection right now. It's based on Nina Simone. There's a pair of worsted weight socks, there's a cowl, and then there's a sweater. This sweater's super exciting. It's I knitted in a colorway that was dyed for me. I mean, I paid for it, but still. I approached Over the Moon Yarn, which is Serena and Caitlin up in Edmonton, just a little short drive away from me. And I was like, I want a sweater in your Asteroid Aran base. And I want it super speckly. And then as I was talking and discussing what kind of colors I wanted with them, a storm blew through. And I was like, it needs to be thunderstorm themed. They knocked it out of the park. I cannot stop staring at the way these speckles knit up. It is so beautiful. When I ordered the yarn, I had planned, oh, it's going to be a Felix, because Felixes are super popular right now. Oh, and someone just drove by really loud. The Felix is super popular right now. And it's cute, it's Aran weight. I was like, sure, that's the one I'll knit. And then, shortly after I placed the order, this sweater came out. And it needed exactly the same yardage that I needed for the Felix, or pretty close. So I was like, that's the sweater. I bought it that day. Then, Shirley's did knit along for it. I hadn't cast it on yet. The knit along started Friday, and yeah, it's on my needles now. I'm going to start by showing the yarn, if I can find the ball. So this is the colorway. Like I said, it's Over the Moon yarn in their Asteroid Aran, which is a 100% superwash merino, I believe. You get, I'm going to talk about the yarn in a little greater depth later anyway, but it's pretty economical on its yardage. I think we are getting a thunderstorm. Yes. Anyway, thunderstorms are my favorite. It's beautiful. It's got these teals and these dark blues. Then there it is. There's little tiny flecks of gold, which I requested as my lightning strikes. When they sent it to me, I figured, oh, it's going to be unlabeled. They won't have named it. It's a one-off, one-of-a-kind colorway. They named it Stormy Skies, which knocks the description out of the park. Anyway, so this is in Over the Moon yarn, Stormy Skies. It's a colorway you can't technically purchase, but I'm sure if you started asking them for it, it could maybe make a comeback. I don't know them well enough to be making that assumption, but you could totally ask them to custom it for you if it really sparks your fancy. So, this is the sweater. This was my last minute, oh no, I dropped a stitch rescue. So I'm going to just quickly fix that because professionalism. And I need this, that'll work. Put that over the needle. So, there we go. It's fixed. I'm using a straight needle to hold my sleeves. I came into a bunch of needles from a guild in my area. They didn't need the needles, and someone I know who goes to that guild was like, oh, well, maybe she'll want the needles. So now they're kind of stitch holders, I guess. This worked really well until I accidentally moved it around a little too much. But it was traveling in my car to the WIP and stuff today, so held pretty good. But Simone is this beautiful textured yoke. I'm sure you've seen it doing the rounds, but it's got like baubles and lace work. There's the tiniest little knot stitches down here. There's like the pearl bump chevron pattern. It's super beautiful. The yoke took me like, I kid you not, 4 hours of knitting time or something. It was so popcorny. I've got one sleeve done because I'm realizing my issue is sleeves. I get the body done, and then like socks, I don't want to work on the sleeves. So I figured, do the sleeves first. Brie, if the sleeves are done, you'll get the sweater done. Yeah. So I've got the first sleeve done, and all the stitch markers are still in it because I cast it off in the car on the way to the U-Pick. The baubles aren't written in the pattern, but this was my first time doing baubles, and I was like obsessed with them, so naturally my cuff now has bobbles. And I knit the cuff a little longer than the pattern calls. I have monkey arms, so made them a bit longer. But the yarn knits up so beautifully. Like, can we just take a minute and appreciate those darks and those teals and those golds? It's a little more vibrant in person than the camera is picking up, but it's stunning. Like always, Serena and Caitlin of Over the Moon knock it out of the park. I kid you not. As does every other dyer I've shown you so far. Vivid, Hedgehog, Olin, Sea Turtle, Ancient Arts. They all just blow it out of the park. They're amazing. Even Knit Picks. Knit Picks is consistent, and some of their stuff looks just as hand-painted, hand-dyed. It's the conversations happening right now in the knitting community around yarn inclusivity and like budget yarns. Knit Picks are an awesome alternative. If maybe you don't like acrylic, I do knit with it, but I find because it's a plastic, it doesn't breathe so awesome. So if you still want wool, but due to any life circumstance, buying indie dyed skeins all the time is not approachable. It's really not for me either, but or it shouldn't be, but I don't party, I don't buy a ton of clothes. I put my alcohol and party dress money toward yarn instead. And I totally recognize the privilege I have to use the yarns I use, so I'm going to make an effort to make sure I show things that I work in more budget-friendly alternatives on this podcast, because I feel that's really important to me. There are certain yarn manufacturers, I'm not going to start throwing shade on my podcast, but there are, that hold beliefs that I find a little problematic towards knitting with budget yarns. Don't know why I'm choosing to go off on this tangent now, but it's my podcast, so we're going to do it. There are a few, particularly, there's a couple of companies that sell what I would consider underweight skeins at a lot more, and then also have the cojones to like make claims about using budget, rather dyeing than using budget yarn. If you have an idea who I'm talking about, you probably know who I'm talking about. And I started knitting with budget acrylics. I still have a fairly decent stash of acrylic, and it's come super far. Like, I am planning to knit the Easy Eyelet yoke dress in a bunch of Michaels brand loops and thread, because it's in my stash, and I figure if I'm making a dress, I may not want to splurge on like 1,400 yards of indie dyed yarn for a project I'm not even sure I'm going to feel comfortable wearing. I also love to knit, and if everything I knit for the rest of my life is an indie dyed yarn, I think I'll be broke. So I want everyone on this podcast, regardless of what you're knitting or crocheting or sewing, budget-friendly options or just alternative options. Not everyone can use wool. Not all of us are blessed to not find it itchy or not be allergic to it. Or some of us maybe are vegan, and we don't necessarily want to be buying wool or whatever, even though the wool has to be sheared anyway. But if you feel you don't want to use wool, that's your bag, not mine. But that's just a small tangent that I'm super fortunate to be able to use. The yarns that I'm going to mostly talk about on this show, I'm knitting mostly from stash now. I refuse to, I'm kind of going on a yarn diet. I see beautiful stashes, like the ones the grocery girls have, or Caroline of Dunder Knit, how she has that beautiful backdrop. If you haven't watched her, do it. She's amazing. She is swear encouraging though, so maybe if swearing's not your thing, I didn't send you. But they have these beautiful walls full of yarn, and every time I watch, I'm like, I want that. But then I know I won't knit it all, and that makes me sad. And it makes it hard if I had that much yarn to justify buying more yarn. So I'm trying to knit from stash, which is where all of my stash acquisitions they are all things that I kind of crapped the bed and bought. So recently, I think they're all, with the exception of 2 skeins, they're all within like the last month or so acquisitions. Corona has led me to buying a lot of yarn. That's a whole other issue. But anyway, I just wanted to make it very clear here that everyone, whether regardless of your gender orientation, your sexual orientation, the color of your skin, the body type you exist in, the yarns you choose to knit with, it doesn't matter. Everybody's welcome here. I would hate to know that someone feels they're not welcome watching my podcast or in the podcast community. Yeah, in this time of whatever's happening, we kind of need to stick together, you know? And I don't want people to feel unwelcome, so since I just showed a bunch of stuff knit in fairly luxury yarns, I want to make that very, very clear that this isn't a yarn snob podcast. This is you've caught me in a moment where everything is luxury yarns, which isn't always the case. But anyway, all that to say, if you can, nothing beats a beautiful speckled sweater in a colorway you picked yourself. I can't wait till this is off my needles. There's a country fair that happens out here most summers. I'm hoping COVID hasn't killed it, because it might be an entry, we'll see. Then I have a couple of sewing WIPs that I mentioned earlier and said I didn't have with me. I'm currently sewing 2 quilts. I already did 2 kind of like lap quilt practice scrappy fat quarter quilts. They're messy and crooked and I love them. One of them is actually a gift for my boyfriend's family, because they let me his mom let me borrow a bunch of materials and hooked me up with another sewer who was letting me borrow a bunch of her stuff. But I'm going to definitely include pictures of the one because the top is completely finished. I'm sewing. You don't knit a quilt. I mean, you can, but I'm not. I'm sewing a half square triangle quilt. So basically I made little squares that have a triangle, so it's a solid color and then a pattern. And then I ombre'd the solid colors from dark purple into blues, into greens, and then into oranges and yellows and then pinks. And then I contrasted my patterns. They did the opposite fade, going the other direction so that the fades kind of meet in the middle. Picture will definitely do it more justice. The back is my favorite part. It's a Ruby Star Society fabric. It's a blue grid on a black background, and then it's covered in fried eggs. It's so fun. Basically, it's taking me a long time. Technically, it should be finished, but I've opted to hand quilt it, so I'm hand sewing the sandwich together around all the solid triangles to keep my pattern triangles intact. It's going slow. I might do a chunk of hand sewing, a chunk of machine sewing. I'm not sure yet. I have a few people who are willing to sit down and help me quilt, which is kind of nice, so we'll see how that plays out. My second quilt is not in a state to show a picture of my own quilt, but I will put a picture of the tutorial quilt, hopefully here, otherwise it's right on my nose. But it's called a puff quilt, and there's a wonderful free tutorial by Lo and Behold Stitchery. I'll be sure to link to that in case one of you gets the weird urge to sew yourself a puff quilt. Basically, you make a bunch of little pillows. You sew all these little like 4-inch pillows together to make the top in a like ombre. So I'm doing like sea blues into like mountain tree greens, kind of represent the area I live in. And then you take this blanket made of pillows and then you use it as the top with still standard batting and the backing. It also will be hand quilted. It's tie quilted, so not quite as much work. I just make a bunch of little X's. And then I'm gonna hand sew the binding, give it that little personal touch. The backing is going to be also Ruby Star Society. Apparently I have a thing for their fabric line. Hang on. Water time. Gotta stay hydrated. It's important. Stressful times, you need water. I apologize for the ASMR slurping I just did. But the tie quilts are super easy. I was talking about Ruby Star, not the tie quilting. And it's this pretty pink with just like, kind of like early 90s, late 80s, just scribble geometric patterns. And the soft pink really contrasts the blues and the greens on the front, but it looks super awesome, and the lady in the quilting store was like, you need to make this your backing, obviously. So I did. So pattern pictures there. Mine's done in solids and a completely different color scheme, but it's roughly the same idea. I think I'm making the same size as her picture too. She has a tutorial from everything from like pet bed to king size. I'm doing like a throw. Or maybe it's to queen size, but I'm doing a 63-inch square throw. So I'm very excited to get that done. The puffs are almost finished. It's 324 puffs though, at 4 seams per puff. But actually it's more than that. You do 3 seams. It's a free tutorial, I'm not giving anything away. You do 3 seams, then you sew the row together, so 4th seam. Then you stuff them and sew down, so 5th seam. Then you sew all the rows together. So it's a lot of sewing, and I'm almost done the like original 3 seams of each puff, and then I have to work on the layout. Hopefully I'll have a time lapse of my layout for next video. We'll see. It's also definitely thundering somewhere in the distance now, which makes me very happy. Every time I come out here it threatens to thunder and it never does. So this is very exciting. Don't tell my boyfriend though, because he doesn't like the mess that storms leave behind. So now we're gonna talking about things I wish would happen. We're gonna move into my stash flash is what I'm gonna call it, my acquisitions. But this one's gonna be acquisitions and plans. There are a lot of sweaters I have planned, a lot of garments. I'm a garment knitter. I find that keeps my attention the best, if you didn't notice in my socks. But I picked the ones I'm most excited about because I figured if I show you everything I'm planning to knit, you're going to expect to see it soon. And if I show you something that I'm just planning to knit but it's not on the top of my list, you'll be like, oh, well, where's your So Basic sweater? And I'll be like, haven't started it yet. That, by the way, is a Maxime Cyr pattern. I'm going to knit it with a bunch of Row 1 minis. If you didn't know, Row 1 is a subscription club. You get 10 little 20-gram pre-wound minis. If you watch The Grocery Girls, you totally know Row 1 yarns. I was fortunate enough to get 7 months as a Christmas gift, which is more than enough for me to knit a fingering weight sweater. I guess for reference with my other sweaters, I knit whatever the sweater recommends for about a 42-inch bust. I have, as you saw with the shawl, fairly gratuitous boobs that I have to knit around. Just so you have reference for the sweaters I'm knitting when I talk quantities. I knit what tends to be for most designers like their size 4 or their large, just for reference. Anyway, let's get into projects you can expect to see once my Swift arrives. That's the other thing. I got a ball winder for Christmas, but I don't have a Swift. Has anyone ever tried using a ball winder with no Swift? Yeah, it's awful. So I've still been hand winding everything. I have a Swift in the mail because I have a bunch of like fingering weight sweaters in my future, so I need to be able to wind them a little more effectively. So the first acquisition is probably going to become a Sorel by Woolen Pine. Let me look. Forgive me while I Google. Yes, by Woolen Pine on Ravelry. The original sweater is technically knit. Yes, you knit a sweater. You knit a sweater with mohair. They hold mohair within the fade. I've knit a few things now. I have the Le Pouf cardigan, which we've already seen. I've knit a diaphanous raglan by Jessie Maid, or Jessie May Martin, and a cozy classic raglan, also by Jessie Maid. Both of which, those two, the Jessie Maid patterns, I knit with Surrey instead of mohair because it was what I found on hand and I liked the colors and I was like, that'll work. So I have a lot of fluff, and then I caved, and you'll see in a few minutes another Surrey sweater. So I was like, I don't think my Sorel needs fluff. I have a lot of fluff. So instead I'm going to hold fingering double. It'll be a little thicker, a little denser. That's fine, I'm not too worried. For those of you who don't know, the Sorel is a textured yoke, and then reverse stockinette body, which I believe you knit from the inside, like you knit it inside out, kind of like the Weekender. But it's got these kind of like leaf cable bobble bumps. That's what I'm going to call them, cable bobble bumps, because that's not a mouthful. I'm going to knit it with an impulse buy. There's a yarn carrier based out of BC, which isn't too far from me, Rose and Pearl, and she posted this fade. I believe she called it Quintet, and she only had one, and I happened to see the post like 2 minutes after she put it up, so they're mine now. And it's in the Malabrigo Makita base, which is the 100% superwash single ply. Apparently I have a thing for single ply. I got a lot of it for Christmas, and now it's just kind of become a yarn I'm gonna use for probably inappropriate things like sweaters. But it's their super speckled music instrument themed colorways, which I totally deep stocked before and no one ever had them. So I was like, impulse buying. So it's a 5 skein fade, which should be plenty, I'm thinking. And I'm gonna go from the darkest to the lightest because that's the order I'm gonna grab them in. But first we have Violin, which is a deep purple. It's mostly a purpley magenta, but it's got teal flecks and orange flecks and black flecks and flecks of all the other colors. It's definitely a contender for my favorite of the group just because it's like the darker, moodier one. And then next in the fade would be Viola, so the Violin's slightly bigger sister, I think. So it's slightly less pink, a little more white, a little more teal, still very much in the similar dark end of things. And then we'd have Cello, which is definitely the Violin's older sister, which is much lighter, much more teal, but still plenty of pink. It's gonna get right into the frame. And then we have double bass, which is a speckling of all of them on kind of a cream. Oh yeah, there we go, thunder. And then we have, this must be Violin, because I don't think I've said Violin yet. No, this is piano. I already said Violin. Violin was the first one. And it's the teal of the 5. The camera's not picking it up. It's making it look a lot darker, but it is a vibrant teal. Of course, now I'm fighting with clouds, so the clouds rolled in during yarn show off, as they do. But it's all of them together. Let's see, can I hold 5? These are also like really fat skeins, if you know what I mean, like they're chunky. If I can hold them together. That's the fade they make. It's super pretty. I think it's gonna make a beautiful sorrel, or sorrel. I don't know, I think it's a tree. So probably sorrel. But anyway, I think they're super pretty, definitely an impulse buy. But I will link to Rose and Pearl's shop because I had another friend who's having an issue finding Malabrigo and discovered that Rose and Pearl carries an insane amount of Malabrigo, like definitely worth checking out. So then we've seen my Simone sweater. I'm going to knit the Simone socks. Now Thea I'm talking to you. If you're watching this, these are your socks. If you don't want them spoiled, skip ahead. Everyone else, I have a friend Thea in Norway, and I've promised for like a year and a half now that I'm gonna knit her socks. I started her socks and I didn't like them, so I've ripped them back already. And then I realized, I'm really enjoying my Simone sweater. Maybe I'll like the Nina socks. Even better, they're worsted weight. I will include a pattern picture just because I can never describe things to any justice. I'll also remember to include one of Sorel with past, you know, was it Foresight's 2020? Hindsight's 2020. But this was from a grab bag, so Sea Turtle is making her second appearance. This is the Turtle Bay worsted. I bought it in a mystery grab bag, so I got 2 skeins. I didn't know what I was getting. This colorway is called So It's Blue. This is an 80% superwash merino and 20% nylon. I think it's basically one solid blue. It has an ever so slight variation through it. It'll be slightly tonal, slightly. And they're gonna become a pair of Nina socks for my dear friend Thea in Norway. And they're going to match. I'm gonna make her mug rug, or a mug rug, at least one, from my scraps from my puff quilt. So then that'll be blue, these will be blue. It'll be a very ocean lake themed box. But if she doesn't want spoilers, hopefully she hasn't listened to any of this. So then I think I'm gonna leave my most exciting ones for last. Since we're talking about socks, I'm going to knit the shepherdess socks, which is why I really need you guys to tell me, how do you knit socks in less than 6 months? But I picked up, and you can't buy this anymore either. This was a one-time offer sort of thing. This is the Hello Stella Fibers Grocery Girl sock set. This was a charity yarn for, I believe they donated the proceeds 50-50 between Black Lives Matter Canada and Black Lives Matter America. It really reflects them. It's pinks, teals, fun neons. I think I'm gonna knit the shepherdess socks. It seems appropriate to knit Grocery Girl yarn in a Grocery Girl's pattern. If you couldn't tell, I highly recommend them. Lately they've been doing their podcasts live, but you can still watch them after. But anyway, this neon color is screaming to me to become socks. And the fun little minis obviously need to be on my socks. So I think the one will have pink cuffs, toes, and heels. The other will have purple cuffs, toes, and heels, so that in true fashion they are sisters and not twins. This base is a 80-20 nylon merino nylon. Don't think anyone's gonna knit in an 80% nylon yarn, but just in case. So yeah, this is destined to become socks. Weather update, it is raining. But yes, I think I will be very happy with these socks when they inevitably get cast on. Now, I had mentioned a second diaphanous, or no, not diaphanous, Cozy Classic Raglan. And I've also mentioned gold being a feature of this channel. Yellows are my favorite color. I've got a yellow backpack. I've got a yellow water bottle that's currently empty. Yellow is my color. I own one yellow hand knit sweater. It's a bulky weight in a rustic yarn. I don't wear it very often. So I was like, I need to rectify that, you know? Can't really be on the yellow brand if I don't wear yellow. So I was browsing on my local yarn store Stash's website. They ship internationally, at least to the US. I'll link their shop as well. I was shopping and I spotted slub, which I have been curious to try, in gold. So I was like, this is fingering weight though, and it's gold. Do I really want to commit myself to more fingering weight sweaters? Because while it's my favorite weight to wear, I own one because it takes so long to knit them unless you're monogamous, which I'm trying to become again. I used to be fairly monogamous, but as you saw my WIP pile, that's kind of, I've fallen off the wagon, so I'm trying to get back on. So then I was like, what do I do? Oh, and this is the Hello Stella Fibers Savvy Stella base, which is a 90% superwash, 10% nylon. It's fingering weight, slubby, nubby little base in the color Gold Rush. It's slightly brighter than the camera's picking up. It's not quite as brown. It's a little more yellow. But then I was like, what is it going to become? I love my Cozy Classic Raglan. The only thing is, I screwed up the bind off on the hem, like the body hem. And I did the waist shaping option 2, which is a decrease right before the hem. And so the bottom is like perfect to my measurements, but tight because the bind off doesn't stretch super great. So it literally sits at one height on my body and one height only, otherwise it pops up. So too higher than that height. So it kind of limits me in what I can wear it with. So I think, so I was like, I want to knit another one, but with just like straight body and do the hem properly this time. So I picked up Surrey. This is the same Surrey I used in my Diaphanous and my other Cozy Classic Raglan. It's Lillian Pine Fiber Arts. She's local, she's Calgarian. This is her Dandelion Lace, which is a 74 Surrey, baby Surrey, and 26% silk. This is her Yellow Brick Road colorway. I don't know about you, but the Wizard of Oz is like kind of nostalgic for me, and I kind of think I look like Dorothy, so it seemed appropriate that I wear a sweater in Yellow Brick Road. So I figured these two together, oh my. I'm going to turn this around so you guys can see this. But there's a ninja cat climbing the screen. Yeah. The cats do things here. That would be Xena, one of the outside farm cats. She apparently wants to be a house cat really, really bad. There are a few cats around here. There's also Meadsy, who I might show at the end of the episode. But anyway, these two are supposed to become a beautiful, Cozy Classic Raglan in gold, naturally. So I had 3 skeins of each. For my first one, which was knit in Over the Moon yarn, and then Surrey from Lillian Pine, I used 3 of each and actually a little bit of left over. So I figured I should be safe, hopefully, otherwise it's going to be cropped. I like to play yarn chicken. I like to live dangerously with my knitting. Alright, so this is my most exciting sweater. I think it'll be the next one to get cast on. I'm going to knit this wig. It's a Caitlin Hunter pattern. It was super popular before I was really knitting sweaters, but it's got that distinctive, oh, and she's doing it again, that distinctive block of contrast color in that like lace cable motif. So I knew I wanted to knit it, and I had received some mystery Olan from Ireland from my mother for Christmas, and due to crazy Christmas shopping, it was more like a New Year's gift, but no fault of anyone. It was kind of nice to receive like Christmas gifts that extended past Christmas. It was Christmas every day. But it's this deep purpley gray with just the nicest speckles of greens and other purples and lots of purple. This is her singles base. Like I said, I came into a lot of singles and I want to knit them, and sweaters are what I knit. So I know someone in the comments will be like, oh, singles are like pilly and not meant for things that are going to get a lot of wear. They're not durable. I tend to wear my sweaters on days where I know I'm going to be able to take like really good care of what I do. And frankly, I've knit a few things with singles in them, and I'm finding they're still wearing okay, so I like to take the gamble. I know it's not everyone's bag, but I am aware most people don't knit sweaters in singles. So initially I'd planned to use this with a skein of Woolen Boon Coven in her singles base that I have in my stash. Then I was trolling through Instagram, and Lobby Anime recently came out with a Miyazaki collection. Oh, we have kitty sneezes. Gross. Are you okay, Mitzi? Mitzi's the inside cat. And I'd wanted some, it was a pre-order, and I was like, I don't know what I'd do with it, so I didn't. But then she did a shop update, and she had extras from the pre-order, and she was like, I'm selling these extras of my Miyazaki collection. Needless to say, I had been obsessing over Howl and Sophie, and I was like, Howl and Sophie, which if you didn't know is her Howl's Moving Castle colorway, really, really would work with that gray I have at home. And I was like, and I have just a little bit too less of my gray to be confident I can finish the sweater. And I was like, what if I buy 2 skeins of Howls? And then if I need to, put a little on my cuffs. Perfect, you know? Wear it on my chest and on my arms. So I picked up 2 skeins of Lobby Anime, who's a beautiful dyer in Paris. These are my first and, we'll see, maybe my only skeins. The Canadian dollar's hurting really bad, and to buy yarn in euros is harsh. Worth it, but harsh. So this is her singles base, which is 100% superwash merino. And this, I snagged 2 of them. This is Howl and Sophie, which shipped to my house in less than a week. It was insane. But it's got pinks and teals. If you aren't aware, I'll maybe put a picture of what Howl and Sophie look like. But Sophie wears a teal dress, and I think at some point there's a pink bow maybe involved. And then Howl has this beautiful purple cape, and he's a wizard, so there's lots of like neon magic that flutters around through the film. So this thunder. So this really has kind of colors for everyone, and there's even like some orange and red, which I think is a nod to Calcifer, the fire demon. Anyway, it's going to become my contrast color in my Zweig. So I have these 2 beautiful skeins of it. They make me so incredibly happy. I'm worth every conversion penny, definitely. But they just make me very, very happy. And her logo's super cute. And she had these stickers. I think they were very limited quantity, but she was sending them that week. I forgot to bring it. But it's this cute little drawing of her, Amy of Lobby Anime, or maybe it's Ame then, because of the name, riding a bike with a basket full of yarn. I think I'm going to stick it on my laptop. I might stick it on my iPad, which I'm using to film this. We'll see. But it was super cute, and there's a lovely little postcard in there, and the attention to detail is very, very, very satisfying. But they're so pretty, and I'm very glad. So that everyone can see them together, that will be my Zweig. I feel like it's very Howl inspired. His cape is very much kind of this purple. So it may be my Magician's Zweig, we'll see. But that is about it for yarn content that I have brought with me. I've shown my WIPs, I've introduced myself, went on a small rant about inclusivity, showed my acquisitions and my future projects. So now it's into the big announcement, which I forgot to bring with me, so it's back at my house. But I'm releasing a sweater pattern, or no, not a sweater pattern, that's ambitious. I can't even begin to figure out how to knit one for myself, let alone grade one for everyone else. I am knitting a hat pattern, and I'm in the process of writing a nice clean copy. I had a friend test knit it for me because she was looking for a hat pattern, the same friend who just learned how to knit a sweater. And then I think I'll send it to another friend just to make sure, someone with a little more skill. so that it's not like too boring for someone who can knit usual content. And now we're getting blinded by the sunshine. But I'll put a picture of my sister wearing it, I guess, and I'll maybe put a little thingy on her face. But I'm calling it the Beam Me Up Beanie. It's knit in the same yarn as my Simone sweater, so in Over the Moon yarn Asteroid Erin. It's got this little motif of like alien abduction beams that go up to your crown in a stockinette pro bump pattern, so not color work, but like texture. It does kind of gnome, because I snuck the decreases in a way that I would still have full beams to the crown, and because of that it gnomes a little bit, you know, pointy gnome hat. But if you put a pom-pom on, I found it then becomes a perfect slouchy beanie. So I would recommend a pom-pom. I didn't block my sample because blocking hats, it's a lot of work. It's not a lot of work, I just don't like blocking. A bunch of my sweaters are not blocked. But it's a textured pattern. It uses less than a skein. I have to weigh exactly how much it used, but I definitely have enough to do like the cuff of another hat or the brim of another hat with the leftovers from the first hat. So, and I think my friend did it in closer to a worsted and still got like a perfectly fitting hat. So it's a worsted to Aran weight hat pattern. It's one size at the moment, but you could easily like cut out a repeat of the beams or put in a repeat of the beams. I'm gonna put notes on how I think you should do that to make it bigger or smaller. It fits my head, it fits my sister's head, it fits my mom's head, but she has like hair, and so she has a hard time with hats, and it's a little snug on her if she rolls up the beanie. If she leaves the beanie down, it fits her fine. Or if she rolls the brim, it's too snug, but if she leaves the brim down, it fits her fine. And the brim's 3 inches, so you can like fold it or unfold it, whatever you want to do. I'm hoping I can have it completely written by the weekend. And then depending on what I decide to do for finding a few other people to knit it, it may or may not be released this weekend or sometime next week. But I think I'm gonna do tiered payment on Ravelry. So basically, I want my stuff to be accessible. I'm not really making patterns to make money. It would be nice to be compensated, but like, I don't intend to go completely that direction. And it's my first pattern, so Lord knows it's gonna be sketchy. So I think I'm gonna do tiered, kind of like Jessie Maid does, where she offers like coupon codes, where if you're like me, or if you're in a country where your conversion rate is sucky and the pattern's American, she offers you one where it makes it the pattern slightly less expensive, so the conversion rate kind of ends up pushing you to what the pattern should have usually cost American or whatever. Or if you can't afford to pay a full price for a pattern, you can choose the tiered options. So I think I'll tier it to like full price and then like a 2/3 and then maybe a half. And then I'll offer pattern support on a free pattern support and on an as asked for basis. We'll see. I also think I'm gonna send it to the beautiful ladies of Over the Moon so that they can kit it, and I'll send them a code and some printed versions maybe. I also think if I launch it and this podcast takes off enough, I'll consider doing a giveaway of a Beam Me Up kit. So that would include the Aran weight yarn, the pattern, a pom-pom, a faux fur pom-pom. The only thing you would need then is your scissors, a darning needle, and a US size 7 knitting needle. It's knit entirely on the one needle. I don't change for the cuff because that's a lot of work, and I want my patterns to be simple and not involve switching your needles around or if you don't own like a hat is a perfect project for someone who maybe is new and doesn't own a interchangeable set yet or doesn't want an interchangeable set, then it saves you needing 2 different needles. You just need the one. And my US 7 was one of the first needles I bought when I started knitting somewhat seriously, so I figured it's a fairly standard needle. But yeah, hopefully I remembered to put a picture in here somewhere. Maybe it's still up. Editing will be a fun adventure on its own. But I'm hoping to have that released. So that'll be soon, within the month, I think, for sure. Because I'd like to have it out before I start school. Because it was supposed to come out in like January, and then exams happened, and I just never got around to writing it properly. So I need to make sure I'm on my game. It needs to get posted. It needs to get done. I want it out in the world. I want to see beautiful faces wearing my hat. That's all I want. So for a few final housekeeping things, again, you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Big Knot Knitting. Technically, there's a Facebook page, but it's for like when I was trying to sell hats in high school and I never use it. But if you want to find it and start interacting with it, go nuts. There's also a Ravelry podcast group, which should be the Big Knot Knitting Podcast or just Big Knot Knitting Podcast. I'll be sure to link it. The logo's the same as the logo here. It should be fairly straightforward to find. I'll be posting all my show notes on that Ravelry group. I'll also be making an Instagram post with kind of a tag of everyone I mentioned, so you can find them on Instagram a little easier. I think I'm going to do this weekly or bi-weekly, so every second week, not 2 times a week, but every second week. So I may put a poll up on my Instagram or on here, see what people like, whether they like weekly or bi-weekly podcasts. My schedule might change a little too, just because like once September rolls around, things will shift a little bit. I'm still a student. But for the moment, I think it'll be video drops on like Wednesday evening, Thursday mornings, sometime in there, depending on when I film and when I finish editing. Everyone is welcome. Please leave comments on anything you thought I said. If you want more shenanigans, less shenanigans, more yarn, less yarn, you want to see more whips. If you want that sweater tour, let me know. But yeah, I think I've talked for over an hour now. I find I like my podcast at about an hour, so I think it's about time to wrap it up. But weather update, it stopped raining and it's hot in here again. Like they say, if you don't like the weather in Calgary, wait 5 minutes. It's blowing the other way. It always does that. But yes, I've got, hopefully next week or 2 weeks from now, depending on what I do, I will have some more finished sweaters. I'm hoping to maybe have 2 finished sweaters and a quilt if we're lucky. But I think I'm gonna call it. I'm out of shenanigans. I've announced the hat, talked about my whips, talked about my acquisitions, talked about the strawberries. I hope you all find a strawberry moment today. Something equivalent to biting into the freshest, juiciest, nose-sized, organically grown strawberry. Like, peak strawberry. Like, don't even think about the grocery store strawberry. Think about, like, what you think an anime strawberry would taste like. I hope you find a moment like that today, or tomorrow, or whenever you're watching this. I hope you're staying safe, staying healthy. And if you're not having a strawberry moment or things are not good for you, I hope you find a moment to just take one for yourself, take a deep breather. I hope your knitting and your sewing and your crafting brings you joy. But other than that, thank you for joining me on my inaugural podcast. I'm sure it was the bumpiest, rockiest nightmare of a row. I just realized I'm going to have to put a swear disclaimer at the top because I'm pretty sure I said crap at least twice and maybe even ass once. I've definitely done it now. And then, yeah. Again, find your strawberry moment. And I shall see you on my next video. Goodbye.